All right, welcome to GaulCast. I have a kind of a screwed up voice because I'm getting over being sick, and Branogarâ is taking a little hiatus, just trying to get things in their life together, and they will be back at some point in the future. Until then, we're going to have my good buddy Rînhund Runosagiton as my temporary co-host. Introduce yourself, bud.
Hey everybody, so I'm Rînhund Runosagiton, and name means Rhinehound, Seeker of Mysteries. Uh, so I've been doing the whole Gaul thing for about a year now, officially, almost a year. Prior to that, I was in the general Celtic sphere. I did my little foray into Norse heathenry, other stuff like that. I'm a member of Total Galatian of Mantelon Bolgon, and in the process of being inducted into Tia Francus Galcito, the Frankish heathenry tradition as well. Yeah, I heard about the hiatus going, and Arcatus reached out, was like, "Hey man, do you want to come do this?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. I love GaulCast. I'd love to help out." So, yeah, man.
Yeah, they're going through something I went through a little while ago, which is another reason why the last episode was so late. And on the top, I just feel like a lot of us as in Gaulpol have kind of had to go through that heathenry phase. I know I did for a little bit too. I mean, it's more continental now than straight up Norse heathenry, but I've just noticed a lot of times it does tend to be a common phase that we go through.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot. That a lot of the people have done that. I think one of the only ones I know that didn't was Branos.
Yeah, Branos was a different story.
It's like here's my 18 druid orders. Oh, Gaulpol. Hey, whatever works, man.
Sorry, we're all dads here, so we have like children in and out. I have I have 4 of my 5 that are kind of hovering around me, asking me things.
Yeah, I think between the 3 of us, there's like 6 children. So,
yep, right. So we are wrapping up our little series on Oh My Gods, and we're ending it with spirits. And for that, we brought in our friend
Renotaurus.
Renotaurus, yeah.
Yeah, the pronunciation on that one can be a little questionable for some people, so I absolutely get the hesitation on a second. Yeah, it's Renotaurus Phôlsson, which is the Bull of the Rhine, son of Phol. 2 very important deities in my personal praxis, so that's where the name comes from.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little about yourself there.
I am a Gaulish polytheist. I have been for probably coming up on about a year now. I joined TG back in November, but I've actually been reading your blog, Arto, since probably about April of last year, which was kind of my gateway into it. For a long period of time, because I'm originally from Switzerland, I was searching for a polytheism that would accompany my cultural heritage, just being from Switzerland. I'd been a Norse pagan for a long period of time, but I found that wasn't agreeing with me as much as I wanted it to. Oh, sorry. My daughter just stubbed her glute on the door. So I
it's pretty
done
impressive.
A bit of she's gets her accident proneness from me. But I'd found a connection with your blog, and I started incorporating Gaulish polytheism, which eventually led the more heathen side of my practice into more continental, as you guys were just talking about. Everyone has that phase. Hi, yes, half of my life is that phase. And what you mentioned last time, Arto, on the podcast, is my main foray is into the Alemanni and the Suebi, but I am also a member of MB, Mantelon Bolgoi, which what Rînhund mentioned earlier. So I also dabble a bit in the Belgic and the Helvetii.
Yeah, and when I first met you, I was extremely flattered, just because the whole blog thing was just like a little fun project for me. I didn't I wasn't expecting anyone for it to really resonate with anyone. Like, but
wasn't expecting the fanboys to come out.
Yeah, I think he called me senpai when we first met.
Oh yeah. I was like, whoa, senpai, no. I had that precise moment.
But the reason I started it is like I didn't initially want to start a blog. I wanted to just find the information myself, but there was nothing for because I'm Swiss on both sides. You know, my mom's side's from Zurich and my dad's side is from Walden. So like there was really nothing. So I just had to just do my own research and I just kind of put it out there. And yeah, it seems to have worked out for us.
I think there's a big desire for learning from the more Central Europe, you know, in the heathen sphere as well. When I wanted to branch out into a more local custom, there was just absolutely nothing. So I had to roll up my sleeves and do a lot of the digging myself. And so I think what really inspired me is that I wasn't going to be the only one doing something similar. So seeing a blog like that, publishing that work, and that's something for any polytheist out there that's digging into a very specific, very local, very unknown custom, is that you have no idea how inspirational you are to other people who are attempting to do the very same. That's why work like that is so important.
That's how I felt when I found TFA. And I was like, this clicks. It works.
Yeah.
It's like it's like the natural continuation of what I was already doing. And it makes so much sense. And it just clicked in my head. I was like, all right, cool. Yeah. And I started talking to Eric, the guy that started TFA. Wonderful, wonderful person. And so it's been really, really cool to go down that road too.
Right on. All right, well, let's get to the topic at hand, which is spirit and spirit work and just working with spirits. Because you know, typically, you know, we usually like work with like deities, but like spirits are. And I don't want to use I don't like using the word like minor deity, but that's kind of what spirits are in a way, is a minor form of divine. And the previous two episodes of you know, the gods and the ancestor and hero veneration kind of fall under that spirit work as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't like to use minor either. I think more localized is a little better.
Yeah,
that's what I like to use, is more localized with like smaller spheres of influence. Basically, that's how I do like the hierarchy that nobody likes to talk about.
Yeah, you've hit on it pretty well. I think a big tenet is that, at least in terms of building blocks, the Dewoi, the spirits of the land, and as well other more mythological spirits like fairies, dwarves, and gnomes, whatever you want to call them, they are all essentially made of the same stuff. You're just dealing with degrees of magnitude, I want to say. And like you said, it's not necessarily a power thing, but maybe more of a reach thing. You know, the Dewoi that were venerated throughout a large swath of land are going to have more influence than those of one particular grove or one particular spring. And I think it's really important that you mentioned territory and locality, because quite frankly, that's a lot of times what spirits, at least spirits of the land, are. It's the spirit of the place, and it makes sense that it would logically be tied to said place.
Yeah, exactly. I think you guys summed it up great. Yeah, and localize is a way better word than minor.
Got you.
In the little bit of research I've done, a common form of spirit work is dealing with household spirits, spirits that kind of protect and maintain the order of the home.
Mm-hmm.
I know one thing I looked up briefly before yesterday was it was briefly, so I might be getting this wrong, but I know in like Swiss folklore there's kobolds.
Yes. Not the D&D race. It has nothing to do with tiny little lizard men.
No.
Are you sure? Because it should.
It should. I'll go back in time and I'll let them know. But
it's like these are now lizard people.
But you were saying about, I'll let you talk about kobolds because I have plenty of stuff to add on that. So I'll let you talk about it first because I feel like we're going to cover a lot of the same ground.
Oh, that's honestly it. I looked over them briefly, especially since
It's like I just kind of saw they were there and was like, I'll bring it up and see where Reno goes.
Yeah, there's a huge thing with household spirits. We have the Romans had a big thing with their household deities. We see it over in the Norse as well with the husvitir, which is the more modern neo-pagan interpretation, but the spirit of the house. There's a great and wonderful book out there about the different spirits. I'll write it down somewhere because I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But in Swiss mythology, we have kobolds. What a kobold is, it is small, almost like a Nissa from Scandinavian mythology, a small being, oftentimes diminutive in size, oftentimes non-corporeal, so it can present as a gust of wind or mischievousness. So if things start flying off your shelf, you have a kobold. And a kobold is the spirit that inhabits the house. It does not necessarily belong to the structure of the house. So the way a kobold works is that there's actually a capturing that has to occur. So the kobold is a spirit from outside that wanders inside and will be helpful and sometimes a little mischievous, never malicious or harmful, but you can convince it to be on your side by naming it. Some traditions go from giving it a name to guessing its name. So if you are able to capture the kobold and by giving it a name or figuring out its real name, then you establish a bond between the two of you. And we have detailed records of shepherds in the Swiss Alps leaving out bread, cheese, milk, and in more modern incarnations like the cartoon Pumuckl, which is about a kobold and his master, chocolate. So it very much figures into praxis. You leave small things out for the kobold, and the kobold in return, it's not like you can give him commands or them commands. They just pick up the slack. You may come home and you may notice the oven's clean, or the load of laundry takes just a little bit less time to do, or oh man, clean up went really quick today. And just with household chores. Another great thing is in terms of protection. So I had a falling out one time with someone who was a bit more magically inclined than I was. I like to say I am not a person who participates in a lot of magical things. A lot of mine is very more spiritual. But I've had a falling out with this person, and at the same point in time, I never felt any sense of danger or dread because I have a very strong bond with the kobold in my house. Some folks may call it a house spirit, but we have coffee together every day. He's a stand-up little dude. So I had absolutely no dread at all. I'm like, whatever it is, we'll just bounce right off that. Yeah, he's about this big, and he's currently resembled because just like with an altar, you might feel inclined to put up a small area. Mine is represented by this tiny little tiki souvenir that we found that my daughter kind of gravitated towards. And so, I have a little kobold represented by a tiki statue. And the kobold really kind of bridges into the next thing, is that a lot of things we may consider mythological are spirits of the land or spirits of places. So the big ones from Switzerland, and I speak again from a Swiss perspective because that's where I'm from. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier today, but I'm Switzerland. I was born and raised there. I'm the whole country of Switzerland. But the big one,
all the Swiss,
prominent there are you have gnomes, dwarves, elves, mermaids, and giants. Those are the big ones. And what strikes me as very interesting in Swiss folklore is that the stories go about 50-50 on the spirits being corporeal. So, assuming human shape that one can touch. And the other half of the stories, they are distinctly described as gusts of winds or even personified mountains and avalanches. I have to put in an Elsa braid.
Yes, that's actually something pretty cool because I remember you and I had talked about this at one point. It was the giants really that were these big like forces of nature, like the avalanche and stuff like that. Something along those lines.
Hmm. There's an origin story of the Swiss national flower, which is also the Austrian national flower, the Edelweiss. There's an origin story of that being that the Switzerland used to be covered by ice, and now part of this is cultural memory from the Ice Age. And it being covered in ice was in fact the work of ice giants, which are very, very popular in Swiss mythology. And one of the giants is an avalanche, and his brother is the glacier, and they have another brother who is the snowstorm. And these three giants, who their names differ. Sometimes the giants have, very, very Latin names like Gargantua. Sometimes they have silly names like Rübenzahl, which means the one that counts all the turnips. So the names vary, depends on who's telling the story. But they had completely covered Switzerland with ice. And as such, the sunbeam elves, who traveled down on the rays of the sun, came and melted away the ice and freed Switzerland up for the inhabitants so that the Gaulish tribes could move in and populate the area. And after the battle between the Sunbeam Elves, when they had banished the giants to the peak of the mountains, which is why the mountains are still snow-capped, they became so drained of power, they had to assume a corporeal form, and they were so weak, the only form they had left to take was thank you. The only form they had left to take was that of trees, of glens, and the queens, the royalty of the Sunbeam Elves, actually assumed the form of the Edelweiss. And it is highly illegal to pick Edelweiss. It's seen as very, very bad luck to do so because you are essentially disturbing the spirit of the place. And even people who, don't believe the folktales of this have great respect for the Edelweiss. I'd compare it almost to the bluebonnets in Texas, if you want to relate to that one, Rînhund. So
I can relate to that a lot. I don't think it's illegal to pick bluebonnets, though.
Yeah, but people get really uppity at you when you do.
Yeah, it's real culturally not cool. We'll go roll around in them and take pictures all the time.
For the Instagram. Got to do it for the gram.
Got to do it for the gram. Anyway, but it's real weird when you start picking them and people get a little upset about it.
Well, in Switzerland, it makes sense because you are picking the fairy royalty who literally gave their lives to defeat the frost giants. So in that sense, it makes sense. But it does tie back into earlier comments that you made with a lot of the spirits being local to the place or the area. So if you know that there's Edelweiss there can be an attribution to the Sunbeam Elves. And we also have in Switzerland the Gnomes and the Dwarves. Now, the Gnomes and Dwarves are a little bit different than you may have a conventional idea of them. The Dwarves are seen as generally good-natured, small, funny little people that live in mines and caves. And
it tracks so far.
But they are not the same as the ones from Norse mythology that are malicious. They're generally good-natured. In fact, Swiss culture even goes so far to say that it was the dwarves of the mountains that invented the flintlock pistol, so that we could defend our territories. It's just one of the many sayings. Of course, we do know who actually invented the flintlock pistol, but there's no saying that they didn't have some help from some dwarves. Yeah, or at least the inspiration. It could have very well been a unity between the spirit of the place and someone who went to work there frequently or just happened to pass through. Gnomes, on the other hand, are the more stereotypical dwarves, the gold-mongering kind of really, really black-eyed and aggressive little guys that live underneath the earth, which is very different than in the mountains. And yeah, that's, again, part of their domain.
I forget what they're called, but up in the Alps, are supposed to be like these little. They're small. They're probably in the same family as the gnomes and dwarves, but like they're these hairy little big-footed
yes. Those are the
Yeah, I can't
Berengasi
remember
from
their name.
Berengasi from the Italian part of the Alps. They are lovely. They're like little yetis, and they have huge feet. Think of it like Bigfoot had a kid with a dwarf. Same thing, hurtful, harmful. But the really important thing I want to touch on is that a lot of the names, the labeling of these spirits is almost very arbitrary, because you will find similar legends in Ireland and Switzerland with very different labelings, very different groupings, because the spirits of place are just as diverse as the Dewoi are, just as diverse as the gods. Putting them into a box and assigning this one function, which more modern storytellers are wont to do, is really not beneficial or honest to them either. And so that's why I want to touch on that, if the spirits that you experience in a place where you are, or the spirits of legend you have heard, are different, then that's okay. Just how different land and different countries have different cultures and different customs, so too will the spirits of the land be different. Even if we worship the same gods, they may present differently in different places. Epona in southern or northern Italy would be very, very different than Epona in Kansas, for instance, just in regards to the interaction and then the people that are interacted with.
Yeah, exactly. And to kind of tie things back to Gaulish, that there are Gaulish specific deities, but like if you were to look into them, they do kind of fall into these kind of common archetypes, if you will. Obviously, the Gaulish people had giants, they had dragons, they had. I'm looking up the list of them because I didn't do it. Quick disclosure, I woke up very late for this today, so I'm a little unprepared, so excuse me for that, guys.
That's fine.
Yeah, it happens to everybody.
And we have these list of archetypes, and viewing the gods just as archetypes is highly reductive, although some people choose to go about it that way of their praxis, and if that works for them, that's cool. But it just goes to attest that even so, they're not all the same. You can have Tyrannus and Thor and Donar and Jupiter all in the same room, and they're not the same guy just because they do similar things. The same way you can have, 4 different dwarves from all over the world that are not going to be the same. Thinking that all dwarves can be interacted in this one way is also a little bit, I don't want to say reductive.
Exactly. Yeah. And I didn't want to use the word archetype, but it was the first word that kind of popped in my head.
Well, it is kind of a hot button issue in a lot of polytheist communities, and oftentimes when we deal with folks who synchronize practices, who may have deities from one pantheon and another, that's a big fear that arises is syncretism and the reduction thereof. And just the same can happen with local spirits and land spirits. If you choose to say, oh, well, those folks just don't get dwarves, you may be missing the point that the dwarves there are different, or the dwarves or the relationship that those people have with dwarves are different.
Yeah, exactly. And in Gaulish, the name for spirits of the house would be tegatis, and then there's kaitatis, which is 4 spirits, gortiatis, which is spirits of the garden, and the things kind of go on, and I'm sure there are sources that will back up these these various spirits. And I know for BNG, I wrote a article on the Duzioi, which was very interesting. It was a lot of fun to do that, and it was in kind of like how we've been talking about these various Swiss spirits. They are they choose to be corporeal, but typically they are more ethereal. Like they're like a gust of wind I think is one of the roots of their name, Duzioi. Or it's like a breath. They're like a phantom almost. And honestly, when I was researching them, I did a divination session to try to contact one, which I also did some protection stuff, because they're also notorious for being a little bit above mischievous and actually borderline malevolent. So, but when I was trying to do this divination session, I had a candle lit, and the second I started talking to this thing, all of a sudden, like the candle flickered as if like someone was like went on it, and it was interesting. Like, yeah, it was really interesting. Obviously, like nothing came from it, and I believe the tegotatis of my home are fairly powerful, because I live in the Pacific Northwest, and we are going through another batch of wildfires thanks to the heat wave. And but we went through this last year. We actually were considering evacuating because it was getting really close. But there was one night where I looked outside and I saw like these what looked like shadowy little kids running around the house, and then and next thing I found out that the fire was taken care of. So I've had my experience with various spirits around here myself.
Well, and from a to use a heathen term, in the shared personal gnosis sphere, that ties in exactly with how they're described: diminutive in stature, mischievous. I mean, it goes to show that even a more Gaulish interpretation has similar interactions. But again, the deities that you may have been dealing with may have been a bit more on the aggressive side, and that's just different relationships with different ones.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah, something similar for me is so in 2017 when Hurricane Harvey came through Houston, the road I lived on in the suburbs would flood all the time. Okay, it could rain for like 2 minutes, my whole road's flooded. Okay, so Hurricane Harvey came through and just dumped like a year and a half worth of rain on us in like 2 days. I don't know if you had been in the area when that.
No, I had not lived here yet.
Oh, dude, it was a nightmare for everybody. So my street cleared the whole time. Dumped like a year's worth of rain on us, and my whole street was clear. Everybody there was perfectly safe. The main road flooded to like thigh deep. So I had to walk across the street to go to like the Family Dollar that was open, So I'm trekking through like thigh deep water. It's crazy. It's insane how that happened, because our power would go out all the time. Internet doesn't work, all that. The whole time that everything was going on. It was a very, very dark time for Houston. And we were fine.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about that. Now that this is the view that I have, to look back on that and go, oh, okay, yeah, it all makes sense.
Yeah, spirit of the place ensuring that the place stays the way it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously had a dog in the fight. That's really, really cool. Wish I had a similar awesome experience, but the closest thing is that I have a miniature sacred grove in my backyard. It's this big old oak tree. Absolutely love it. It's where most of my ritual stuff happens. And in order to make peace with the spirits of the land, when I cultivate the land, and by that I mean when I mow the lawn, like every dad does on Saturday, when I mow the lawn, I make sure to leave a barrier outside of the lawn that I do mow, up against the fence where the grass grows long and tall. There is a dedicated corner of the yard with a thistle tree that I don't touch. I let the grass there wither up, and I let it grow long. And even though it looks a little strange, it's kind of my sort of leaving that land unclaimed for the spirits to do as they wish. And on the cultivated land, in order to appease the spirits of my yard, we have built a little fairy garden. Fairy gardens are very much an Irish tradition, though we do them in Switzerland as well. And I know there's some debate on that, whether or not being a closed praxis in that regard. But I do want to open up the Swiss interpretation of fairy gardens to whoever wants to do them. And I think Arto's with me on that. So if you want to do the Swiss interpretation, which is, you're going to erect the stereotypical fairy garden, and make sure that you construct it like a regular town. You have all the houses facing inward, and then create like a meeting spot for them. And on festival days or days when I give large offerings outside, they'll get something as well. So on my wedding day, they got glazed donuts. On the most recent ritual I did for the summer solstice, they got all of the fat from the meat, and they got like a glass of milk, just something to keep in harmony with the spirits. Because if I look out for them and I give them the respect that they are due, nothing will befall me. And so far, that's proven to be absolutely true. The same thing, though, is to be said when I do a ritual outside. You always have to kind of reclaim the space a little bit. And so what I'll always do is I have a very specific procedure I go through where I will reclaim the space every time, and I will tell the spirits of the land, the kobolds, the fairies, the whites, whatever you want to call them, that I'm currently going to be conducting a ritual in this space, and if they bear any ill intent towards me, that they should vacate the premises until I allow them back in. And that kind of mutual respect seems to have gone a long way for them.
Yeah, and that's a common in my practice as well. And maybe not specifically what you've done, but it's that showing respect. For me, I always make an offering to the spirit of the sacred. Especially if I'm outside, I make an offering to the spirit of the area, the space, because I have a little offering area outside. Actually, I have two of them if you consider my fire pit. I usually will leave like I have some gems and stuff inside. I kind of leave out there. It is kind of like kind of a gift, kind of a hey, I'm honoring you in this way with I have like bloodstone and amethyst and things like that. I will always not so much since I found out I am diabetic, but I typically will leave like a wine offering, and the spirits I've worked with have really liked wine.
Who doesn't?
Duzio, I love wine. Right?
Who doesn't like wine?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's for anyone listening that wants to try to work with the local spirits, it's paramount is showing respect, and it can be however it doesn't have to be a specific way, but as long as you're showing that spirit the respect and that you're honoring it, is going to be extremely beneficial, and you may or may not see the rewards of it.
You want to think about, just like you said, feeling out the vibe of the spirit too. I mean, your guys like wine. My guys seem to respond great to animal fat, and the kobold in my house likes coffee. You may find that your mileage may differ. It's about establishing a relationship. You can try multiple different approaches and see what works with you. And what you touched on in terms of respect is the key part. It's easy to think of them as, ghostly animals, which would be entirely wrong. These beings are beings of great power, and they are essentially non-human people. I mean, they're as capable as you are as an individual, probably more so due to the not having limits of a corporeal form and everything. And engaging with them respectfully will go a long way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so the spirits of the place and everything is something that I recently decided I needed to work on. I was like, this isn't something that I've done. So I actually have sat down and thought about it, did some little processes, and actually come up with some localizations for major bodies of water in the area. Like, okay, so this is how this is going to go. Now I'm just trying to figure out where to go from there. So the 4 that I've come up with are for the Brazos River, Buffalo Bayou, the San Jacinto River, and Lake Houston. So with the Brazos River, it's what I've envisioned this whole time is a river dragon. And I just kind of threw these names together and haven't gotten anyone to confirm them. So they may be totally wrong. So this is Ligasecchia, the mud scales. Literally, it means mud hide. Buffalo Bayou, I see it as kind of like a catfish. And so the name I've gotten there is Lascona, the slow one, because so Buffalo Bayou is a real slow-moving river in Houston, and it's also one of the oldest bodies of water in the state. Sorry. They estimate it to be like 18,000 years old. It's old. Then there's the San Jacinto River. So with the river, here's the San Jacinto River. Here's Lake Conroe. I don't remember for sure, but I think it's Lake Conroe. And then from there, it actually branches into the east and west branch. And so there, I've envisioned that as these twin herons, Ari and Ari, east and west, because I'm not creative at all. And Lake Houston, one of the animals you'll find there is a cotton. So all of these animals are native to these areas, obviously except the dragon. But it was too cool a realization to not come to. There's a cottonmouth in Lake Houston that I've named Ultramameros, the Great Nourisher, because most of the water used in the city comes from Lake Houston for all sorts of things. All these bodies of water either have major impacts now, or they are historically important, or they're either historically important or they have major impacts now. Like the San Jacinto River has a lot of history in Texas. The Brazos used to be a major commercial and commerce thing, but now it's used mainly for irrigation and I think power as well. I'd have to look that up again, but I don't remember. I do know it's used for irrigation a lot. So it's a big part of the food and provision in Texas and what we send around the country.
And real quick, because I know Renotaurus, you're gonna take us on a wild ride on Swiss water spirits here.
Yeah,
so,
it's gonna be an exciting one.
And I mentioned this in the Enemy episode. The Spokane River is a spirit that I've worked with, and I've honored, and I actually made an idol for her on my altar. I didn't bother naming her because I didn't want to step on cultural appropriation with the Spokane tribe here. But yeah, I mean, in the thing is, spirits of water are, as I've learned recently, especially from you, Minotaurus, water spirits, excuse me, are very I guess profound, and I didn't realize, especially in Swiss folklore, how numerous water spirits are. And like, even we were discussing this the other day, a lot of the dragon myths of Lucerne, they originate with water, like storms that lead to floods either I think herald the arrival of a dragon, and things like that. It's just like I've noticed how water is a common theme with a lot of these very powerful spirits. So take it away, buddy.
Yeah. Well, what you said is very, very true. A lot of the and it seems that, because Switzerland was Christianized very, very early on, even when it was then repaganized by the immigration of the Alemanni from Germany, and practically half of the entire country became. It was first Etruscan, then Celtic, then Gallo-Roman, then Christian Roman, then Germanic, and then Germano-Christian, and then ultimately Irish Catholic until the Christian Catholics came back. You have a wonderful hodgepodge of stuff. But it seems that even during that time, when it was Germanicized, the Christian clergy very much maintained a local presence. So a lot of the influence for some telltale signs are no longer present, like in Scandinavia. But what did survive a lot of times were the myths and legends and what we know about the water spirits in Switzerland. A huge part of my cultus is devoted to water spirits. Water is a place of liminality, but we also know from the worship of such deoi as like Belanos that it is incredibly healing. Even deities such as Gobanos, which is a Helveti smithing deity chiefly, have a strong association with water, because what is smithing without the water to quench it and the steam that subsequently arises from it? So a huge part of Swiss folklore, and pretty much any Celtic country, and for those of you who are listening who don't know, Switzerland, despite its mixed cultural heritage, very much identifies as a Celtic country, despite the fact that they have a Roman system of government led by a Germanic equivalent of the thing, and they can't decide which one of the four languages is a national language, and they have no opinions about anything whatsoever. They do still identify as a Celtic nation, at least in principle and ideals. And so, just like with Ireland and Scotland and stuff, in the British Isles, a lot of the myths and legends surround water. One of the chief Deivoi in my personal cultus is Rênos Pater, and I specifically address him by his Roman name, his Gallo-Roman name, instead of his Gallic name, Rênos, because quite simply, I think it is a wonderful story, at least culturally explained through the lens of humans, on how something that may have started out as a very powerful and prominent spirit of the land ended up becoming a full-fledged deity adopted into multiple different pantheons. We know from writing that the Gallic tribes up and down the Rhine River revered Rênos Pater. We know that they made offerings to him in forms of animals. They would pour in treasure. They would bend and throw away their swords. And there's even accounts that some of the Roman writers write about the Gaulish tribes there doing essentially what's called a baby proofing ritual, where they would take newborns and submerge them into the Rhine River in order to... Not now. Not now. I'll talk to you in a second. Not now. Where they would take newborns and submerge them into the Rhine River in order to test whether or not they were made of legitimate marriages. Now, your mileage may vary on that and what you actually believe they were testing them for. But we know that actually the same true of the Germanic tribes that lived near the Rhine River, and the Germano-Celtic further up north as well. They offered, similarly to the Rhine, tons of money, tons of loot, hoards, etc. So the Rhine was a very, very important god, but also very highly localized to that specific area. So later on, you have the Romans come on up, and through Interpretatio Romano, they of course equate him to Neptune, but also the Greek Oceanus and the Greek cult of the Potamoi, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of. And so Rênos starts receiving a lot of iconography that is true to the Potamoi. And we don't know whether or not that iconography existed before the Romans got there, but we do know that while the German tribes and the Gaulish tribes loved Rênos and greatly revered him, it was the Romans that elevated him into a full-fledged pantheon. He was made keeper of the oaths for all the local Gallo-Roman tribes, and there was actually a Roman emperor of Belgic birth called Postumus, who in the year 300 ended up breaking away from the Roman Empire, and this is a great story, you should look it up, and ended up forming his own Roman Empire that lasted between 40 and 60 years, and it was basically called the New Belgic Gaulish Roman Empire, or something of the equivalent. And Rênos was
ridiculously long name.
And Rênos was actually one of the gods that was revered as part of that pantheon, and we know that from votive inscriptions and his image being printed onto coins. So that does extend to how spirits of the place may start merely as spirits of the place or as Deivoi, but that position is flexible depending on who you're talking to. It really goes to show that those gods are not so different in scope. Just depends on their reach. And the reason I mentioned Rênos and a lot of the other gods in continental Europe that deal with water is because we have some of our most important folkloric figures from there. A big one in lower Germany as well as upper Switzerland is the mermaid. Now, you may have an image in your head of a mermaid, fishtail and all that part of your world. But the actual cultural description is very, very different. Mermaids and mermen, which actually feature far more commonly, are nothing more than beautiful humans who arrive out of the water. And there are many different stories, but oftentimes it goes like this. There's beautiful maidens in the town square that are spinning silk every day. But every night they have to go back to the pond. And they have to enter the pond at precisely a certain amount of time and walk underneath it. And in the morning, they come back out of the pond. And if they fail to do so, they die. Easy as that. There's also a story that's told in several different cantons about a white bull that escapes a pond or a lake or a river, after which a beautiful shepherd boy, although looking very confused, arrives up out of the same water and pond and has to spend his whole day frantically looking for the bull, capture it, and return back underwater. So a lot of these are, again, descriptions of spirits of the place and how sometimes things can go a little wonky there too. As mentioned, the spirits of place are similar to human beings in that they are non-human entities. They have minds, they have inner lives, just as the Daewoi and the gods do. And sometimes a spirit can break free and he'll have to be reined back in. And a lot of those stories also contain elements of the human interaction. It is said that mermen and human beings can reproduce. Oftentimes they fall in love and get married, and either the merman or merwoman will move out of the lake and the pond and live with the human, but they're always destined to return to where they're from because they're not spirits of this place. And if the human being decides to go live with the merman or merwoman, they're very rarely ever seen again. It kind of always spells either eternal happiness or doom for the person. And a lot of those things are representative to how we interact with spirits of the place. We can invite them into our lives. We can work with them closely, but they may not always be here. The relationship with them comes and goes, and you may have a very strong relationship, but some spirits come and go as they please. And alternatively, going to their realm is not something that is sustainable for human beings, unless, of course, we pass on and we go to the great halls or the roots of the world tree or the realm of the gods in the sky, whatever you personally follow. So that's why I think water is incredibly important. We even have stories of people dealing with it, more of a relationship, and some of these are even more modern. There's a story about how in the Elbe River, which is another one of the rivers that was either always the same deity as the Potamoi cult, or just happen to have a lot of overlap. It's a very similar story to what happened with the Rhine River. But there was a city that was attempting to lay pipes through the river. They wanted irrigation systems, sewage, and all that. And they had spotted several beautiful young naked maidens out in the water. And they're like, "Oh, that's weird. We don't normally see that." And the maidens start appearing more and more frequently the more the construction of the pipes went into. This was done very callously. It was done, for the people, the benefit of man. They put those pipes on there, so the legend goes, and they dropped them into the lake, to which the water started writhing and boiling, and a large naked man arose, hair flowing down, and he seized up the pipes with his hands and threw them out of the water, to which they, of course, stopped the build immediately and took another route for those. And
it's like, this isn't a good idea.
No, not at all, because the spirits of the place, they need to be first and foremost approached with respect. And if you are going to lay pipe right through their place, you're going to upset them. I mean, and civilizations make that mistake from time to time again. We just keep invading nature and overriding the space and the things that already live there, and some people live in great harmony with that. I mean, this even brings me back to that whole Keystone Pipeline thing from a few years ago. I mean, the First Nations tribes that live there, they have harmony, they have understanding, they have history with the land there. And although their worldview is different than ours, they have a deep understanding and an established relationship with that place. And then some big oil baron or whatnot wants to come through and just lay this thing right through the middle of a land that they don't respect and that they have no business being in, because they have not made any proper attempt to become friendly with the spirits of this place. And last I heard, that that pipeline is out of commission because it did not work. I mean, it was damaged and everything. I don't think the spirits of the place appreciated that.
No, and that's not to get too political, but that's something we can definitely see with like climate change. Is like there's a lot of these companies and whatnot are just not respecting the land at all. They're just taking the resources and throwing trash everywhere, and we can see it affecting the world around us, whether localized or global. And clearly the spirits are pissed off. And but yeah, that the Keystone Pipeline and some of a lot of these other like just horrible just flat out insults to nature or I mean, anyone you could look at it and say that we're doing some messed up things that are pissing off the localized spirits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially not to come back on the water train, but look at our oceans. How are we approaching the oceans with respect? Are we doing that? Is that gonna upset somebody somewhere? Probably. And it's just in a lot of it's easy for people to not want their religion to become political or to cause course or strife, but being in harmony with the land spirits is a cornerstone of a lot of polytheistic faiths, especially being a Gaulish polytheist, but also if you subscribe to a heathen background or even one of the more modern neo-pagan interpretations such as Wicca, nature is to be respected. It's part of it, and you can't not acknowledge it. I don't think we have the luxury to sit by and say, well, I don't want my religion to cause discourse. I think in our modern interpretation, we are all very much focused on the relationship between us and the gods, but what has a more immediate impact on our everyday life is the relationship between us and the spirits we come in contact with every day. Is it more pertinent for me to make an offering to Gobanos, or is it more pertinent for me to pick up the trash at the park I visit every Saturday with my daughter to feed the ducks? Because that park, the spirits that live in that park, have far more bearing on my life in a day-to-day capacity than Gobanos does. And I love Gobanos. Guys sitting on my brain all the time. But from a day-to-day perspective, that almost takes precedent. And I think that, like you said earlier, Rînhund, that's something that is hard for a lot of us. And I struggle with it too. It's very, very hard for us because it's easy for us to understand and be in harmony with the gods, because the concept of a god is something we're at least passingly familiar with. But the concept of other non-human entities that live among us is something a little bit out there. And so that's always harder for us to reach. And I feel all of us have to struggle with that to a certain degree. Some probably more. Some people who may be more on this path for longer or take a different approach may find it a lot easier.
Yeah, it's always been like the big spot that I've struggled with is getting that. So that's so talking to Aggie actually from MB really helped me get started on doing that. You were going to say something, Arto? Sorry.
Oh, well, real quick to touch on that. Aggie was someone that was going to be on the podcast today, but unfortunately, schedule-wise wouldn't work out. But we will have Aggie on here in a future episode to talk about his experience. It sounds
it's a good one.
He's such a good guy to go to for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I can't wait to talk to the guy. But while you're all about water, Renotaurus, mountains are more my thing. And when I wrote the articles on Paninos and Alpes, something I kept driving again and again and again is you like, especially because I used to live in the mountain, like the Selkirk Mountains over in Idaho, and when you live in a mountainous area, you have to respect the mountain. You cannot tame it, and if it wants to squish you, it will squish you. Physically at times or symbolically, but like you have to be aware of the seasons. You have to be aware of the how the land is around you. Oh, the snow's coming early. We need to start stocking up on stuff in case it's going to be a really bad winter. So, but it's that something we've talked about earlier. It's that constant respect and treating the land properly, treating it with respect, and honoring that the spirit, whether it's the lakes, the rivers, the valleys, the mountains. It's all about that respect, and I think that's why I said earlier it's paramount to working with spirits is respect.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, couldn't agree more.
Well, I think we've really went over all that, so I think it is time to go over the very first Synobessus Bolgon virtue. Let me pull up the site, and it's a good thing I have both of you guys here because you guys are more familiar with it than I am. So
this is true. I'm also pulling up the site to reread it.
I have the show notes in front of me, so I don't have to do that.
I also had the show notes, but there's more info on it on the website.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Did I delete that tab already? I have so many tabs on my phone. My fiance was looking through my phone one time. She saw how many tabs I have pulled up in Chrome, and like it blew her mind. She's like, "How do you have 36 tabs on your phone?" Because it's all for research.
I've got like 12, and then some of those have like sub tabs because now you can open tabs in groups.
Yeah.
So I've got like 12 groups with some of them having like 5 or 6 open.
Yep, same. Yeah, I discovered the sub tabs, and so there's tabs within. It's tabception. It's tabs within tabs within tabs.
I love that.
Made my life so much more organized. And just as chaotic. It's really weird dynamic there.
Crap! I clicked the wrong one. All right. Anyway, but so it's so Synobessus Bolgon is the Selgowiros, who we had on here last time. It's part of his. It's not tribal, it's more of a regional because it's several tribes within the region that is now Belgium. Am I correct there?
So it was more the region that was Gallia, Belgium. So that's Belgium and probably, if I remember right, some other areas as well, reaching out to the...
You want to think of pretty much everything on the Rhine, everything from Köln or Colony, everything up to the Rhine Delta and then left, I think. Very much the border territory on Germany and France, and then also modern day Belgium.
Gotcha. See,
if I'm
shows you.
want to misrepresent Selk.
Yeah.
Don't take our word on that.
Yeah. Take the two lowest common denominators that are part of that tradition. Take our best guess at that.
But we in a couple months or so, we're going to actually start going over the different traditions, and we will have an episode for Synobessus Bolgon, and we will definitely be more read up by then. But anyway, so on his site, the very first virtue is fear, or I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, fear or worship of the day warrior, basically piety. So in that context, because it's a very if I remember right, looking over the other virtues, it's a very warrior-like viewpoint in the of the Belgoi.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a big part of it.
The only thing to fear is Yeah, so the only thing to fear is the Daewoi, if I'm understanding that correctly.
See, and I think that we're using fear the wrong way there, because we shouldn't be afraid. It's just
I probably am.
It's-
Yeah.
I think what's
like
probably
when Christians say God-fearing
what's
people.
probably
You know?
more apt, and what I love about Sagueros is that he has, yes, child. I'll make you pancakes
Yeah,
in a second. Give me like 15 more minutes while I talk to my friends online. Okay, I'll make you pancakes in a second. Go get some candy. You can have some candy.
Pancakes do
That buys you some time.
I haven't had pancakes in forever.
Go get some
yes,
candy. I'll let you have
Pancakes
some
do sound
candy.
really good right now.
I'm bribing her with candy right now.
Pancake mix?
No. My wife makes the pancake mix. She's very great at what she does. So
real quick,
sorry,
yes, I did use fear incorrectly. That's not the word I wanted to use. So sorry about that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So I've actually got it pulled up right here. So what it says is it's like fear / be in awe of the gods / be pious. So basically, it's what it says is we don't work with the gods. We love them, and as such.
Yeah, it's the same thing that that you were talking about this whole podcast, Arto, is the respect, the healthy admiration and respect of gods. There was no way that I would mistreat one under the any god under the MB banner, because that is not at all how it works. A huge part of it, and like I was saying earlier, Sagueros has done a great job. He's a brilliant visual artist, and he has done a great job of depicting a lot of the Daewoi in this very specific, almost animalistic caveman style, and they all have this very eldritch take on him. And this is just a personal interpretation, but it communicates the MB version of God so well that we love and adore and respect them. But marshmallows, good choice. There is a healthy fear as well in terms of their power, that they are not to be taken lightly. In that regard. Right. And as such, we worship them because they are strong and because they are wonderful leaders and example. And you wouldn't cross them because they are powerful. And that is probably not a terribly smart choice to do.
It's normally not wise to do that.
No, it's not. And I actually have a great story to help support that. So back in the early days of my path, I was on Discord in a Druid group, and we were just kind of hanging out, just kind of talking. And I made a joke about Thor, and about a week or so later, that person's house got struck by lightning, and I felt so bad. So I do not make jokes. I believe that the gods and the Daewoi have a sense of humor, but they do not like being the butt of jokes. So that again falls under the respect factor.
Yeah, I have a similar thing. I oftentimes joke that I don't get along with the ocean, but in all reality, that is 110% due to my own fault. There was a severe flooding in Houston 2 years ago up by where I live, and out of desperation, I was still very much on the Norse path, and out of desperation, I had called out to Njordur to help stave off the flood, and everything worked out. And I had made certain promises that I would fulfill within a given time frame, and then I failed to do so. And let me tell you that my life became unpleasant. Traveling was hard. I lost 2 cars to spontaneous engine combustion, and for someone who's very much concerned with traveling, mostly maritime, that still did seem to fit in there. The amount of sprinkles and showers I was caught in were quite frequently. There was water damage in my house, so everything kind of lined up, and I had to go to severe lengths to double and triple first of all fulfill, and then apologize, and then to promise that we're cool now. So it took a lot of extra legwork, and I feel like I learned that principle on firsthand. And I would still say that to this day I have become very cautious of approaching not water deities, obviously, because that's my main thing, but Njord specifically. Even though I no longer follow that path, I still feel an incredible sense of guilt when I see the name or when it comes up in conversation, because that was somewhere where I had misstepped that could end up very, very poorly for somebody who does similarly. So piety in that regard is very, very important.
Skid must be a fun place for you.
Oh, love Skid. Skid is great. Like I said, I love Nord. I feel like the bad guy every time it comes up.
Yeah, I still feel guilty about that. My friend, like, it wasn't my house that got hit by lightning. It was the person I told the joke to's house that got hit by lightning. I was like, it made it that much worse.
I'm sorry.
It's like, yeah.
Like, because am I the asshole here?
Yeah.
I know. I felt so bad because I got a message from them like almost a week to the day, and I was like, "Can you not make jokes about Thor anymore? Because our house just got hit by lightning and part of our roof is gone now."
Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Whoops.
So later that night, I actually made I did like a little mini ritual to try to apologize to Thor, and I think we're good now. So yeah, I do not make jokes of the gods anymore. It's just
that's out. And there's one thing if you're joking about some strange passage in the Eddas and you're just like, that's funny, or just like, hey, remember when that Roman emperor declared war upon the ocean itself and they all stabbed the ocean? That's pretty funny. But if you're gonna sit there and be unpious, disregard or disrespect your own gods or even gods of that you may not worship or give reverence to, that's not a good idea. That's not how you do things. I mean, part of being a quote unquote a good polytheist is, despite the fact that I am Almanic and Helvetian and Belgian more than anything, if I were to stand outside and just rip on Anubis to a crowd full of people, I can guarantee things wouldn't pan out very well for me. That respect is due because of the power they hold, even if they're not personally involved in our lives very much. It's the same thing where I wouldn't insult somebody that I don't know to a crowd of people. That's bad form.
Right.
That's a great point. Is that real quick? That's a great point. Is that just because you don't follow a certain deity does not mean you get to make jokes about them, because you still have to respect all the gods, all the deity. Just because you're not a follower of Vendatus or Gobanos or Tyrannus, it doesn't mean you get to disrespect them. They are listening, they are watching. So it's better to just, you don't have, you guys get what I'm saying. Sorry, my brain just kind of went off the rails there.
And then the other side of piety is that there is the respect there, but there is also the practice of piety. You have to actually do it. Mm-hmm. For the longest time, all I did was sit there, write things down, and go, yeah, this seems like some really good stuff that I'm going to do, and then never did it. So it's just theory crafting at that point, which I love doing. There's nothing wrong with doing. But at a certain point, you have to actually put it into practice. Otherwise you're just an observer.
Exactly, yeah. And that's something I struggle with too, especially with writing articles. I'll start them, I'll have a page, and I'll have the title, and then I just never get around to it until like a month or so later. So anyone that follows my blog knows that's why it takes me so long to write things down, because I'll start them and I just never finish it. Yeah.
I signed up to do a presentation at an upcoming conference. I'd talk to you guys about it. Nothing's planned. Like, I have the general plan. I'm just waiting to see if I get accepted to actually get it all written out, planned. Like, the plan is there. I've got it in my head. I just kind of put it down if it's going to happen. Which either way, I think I'm gonna pigeonhole that if it doesn't, because it's a really good thing for the next comrade in TG.
So you're gonna figure out whether you're accepted or not to figure out whether or not you're gonna start work on it now or later.
Yes,
I am exactly
basically
the same
just a timing thing, because this is gonna get done, it's gonna happen, and I'm gonna present it somewhere. Now I just got to figure out if it's sooner or later.
Yep. Yeah, it's easy for us to say. It's like, oh yeah, I love and respect the Daewoi, and I follow them. But there's a big difference between actively participating and giving reverence to just liking something. That's what sets you apart. I mean, if Rin, if you come over to my house and we hang out and we barbecue or something and we share stories, and that happens several times, then one can safely assume that we're friends. Right. If I follow you on social media and like all your things and tweet at you, or better said, not tweet at you, I just retweet your tweets, if there's no interaction between us, then it's safe to say I'm a fan. You could even go as far to say I love you, but there is no genuine friendship between the two people. That's part of it. You have to give and interact. It's what in heathenry is commonly termed the gifting cycle. But I know that and Arto, help me out, because I know there's a Gaulish word for it too, which I struggle with.
It's like the circle of gifting, or it's very similar concept. It's like cantless Roddy or something.
Yep. And
I actually have an article on it.
Requires an exchange thereof. You cannot be in a relationship with someone or something without it being a relationship, a give and a take.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't remember the word off the top of my head, but it's somewhere in my phone, and that's just how it is.
It's on my website, I swear.
Well, before we sign off here, is there anything like social medias or any kind of projects you guys want to promote? Like, I think Rînhund, don't you have a WordPress or a blog or something?
I do. It's Rînhund Runosagiton.wordpress.com. It's just me talking about my Franco-Belgic heathenry path. It's interesting. Right now, it's a little bare bones because I just restarted my website. I had the old one. Wouldn't let me change some things that I wanted to. So, Cantos Roddy, the Circle of Gifting.
Nice.
Found it. Yeah, so it's just me talking. I've only got, I think, like 2 posts up there. One was just, all right, cool, new beginnings. And the other one was on the Gaulish goddess Britta, and how I can view her as very similar to both Akessa, one of the daughters of Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine, mainly. I know there's some other associations there. And if you go to TFA, his name is Ascula. He's the god of medicine, of healing, and of the word scap, the holy feasts that you do. Super cool concept. Love it. And then also Hecate. I don't really know exactly how you're supposed to pronounce that one, because there's Sabrina, and then there's everything else that I've ever heard. And so it's like, I don't know.
Not to get off on a side tangent, because I know we're closing out and we're plugging stuff. In the life before this one, I was an actor, and I actually got the audition to be Harvey in that TV show. Now, obviously, they went with someone, different, not as good, but in another life, that could have been me. So, and I could have told them the proper pronunciation, if that makes sense.
What is the proper pronunciation?
Don't know. I have no idea.
You might have helped them with that last season of theirs too.
I haven't watched the last season, so don't just. I'm working on it.
I'm in
season 3. Stop it.
I saw bits and pieces. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
Someone who's read H.P. Lovecraft once, I was like, that's not it, folks.
All right, yeah. I think we can call it a day on that.